Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting of the 15th of February 2022. It's my pleasure to welcome those that are watching live stream. As you would be aware, we are still under Victorian Government health orders, so this meeting is being live streamed. We have a number of council reports to consider today and a number of important matters, but I will start by introducing myself. My name is Nolene Duff. I'm the chair of the panel of administrators, and my colleague panel members, Mr. Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon.
And Mr. Cameron Boardman.
Good afternoon, Chair, and Mr. Belmar.
Thank you and welcome. And we're joined this afternoon by our Acting Chief Executive Officer, Jen Bednar.
Good afternoon.
And we have a number of senior officers present, members of our executive management team, Mr. Clint Allsop, Acting Director, Customer and Business Transformation, Steve Coldham, Director, Community Life, James Collins, Director, City Planning and Infrastructure, Kerry New, Director, Corporate Services, and we're assisted this afternoon by Simon Horsburgh, Jordan Barfoot in AV and Nicole Estrada in Governance. So thank you all for your support. I'd like to open the meeting this afternoon with our statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. Before I proceed with the formal part of our meeting today, I wanted on behalf of the panel of administrators and the organisation of the City of Casey to acknowledge former councillor Amanda Stapledon. As you would be aware, she died last month. So on behalf of the panel of administrators, we want to express our deepest sympathy to the family, and we acknowledge that it's been a very difficult time for many of former Councillor Stapledon's friends and family during this very difficult time. I wanted to acknowledge in particular the contribution that Amanda made to this community. She was a very passionate person. She's not somebody that I knew personally. I did meet her on one occasion, but I have had much feedback about her passion for the City of Casey, the fact that she really always saw the good in people and was available to lend an ear and to help people who needed. She was a councillor here at the City of Casey from November 2008 to February 2020, representing the Mayfield ward. She served as mayor on two occasions, in 2018-19 and in 2012-13, and deputy mayor in 2013-14 and 2017-18. Amanda was also the sole carer of an adult child with a disability, and she understood the pressure on families, carers and our older population. And it was that particular area that was a passion for her. She had a big and strong focus on access and inclusion for people within the diverse Casey community. She also supported many initiatives to grow our local economy, tourism and advocated for roads and key infrastructure for the growing community of Casey. During her last term on council, she was Casey's delegate on a range of community and sector committees and forums, including in the areas of access and inclusion, arts and culture, sport and recreation, local history, tourism, economic development, waste management, sustainability, volunteering and community connection, as well as the Casey Australia Day Awards Selection Advisory Panel. Many would have described Amanda as someone who dedicated her life, aside from her family, to helping others, and in doing so made a significant impact in access to and supporting disability services locally. And it's an issue that's come up many times in my contact with the community, the role that she played in advocacy for people with disabilities within this community. Her untimely passing under very challenging circumstances, including the IBAC Operation Sandham, which I'm not going to make reference to beyond that, is a reminder to all of us about how difficult these processes can be and the care and dignity within which people should be treated during such processes. To that end, the City of Casey offered staff and former councillors support through the independent and confidential counselling and support provider that Casey uses throughout those IBAC hearings. Former councillors were also able to access a number of sessions, and this was offered as counselling, in addition to the counselling support offered by IBAC. That support is continuing to be provided to staff and will continue to be provided by staff that have been affected by these processes. We're also very aware that many people struggle with these matters and they raise issues for them personally. So if in listening to this, you're struggling, then please, it's important to reach out and get some assistance from friends, from colleagues or professional support counselling services. And in particular, Lifeline is a well-worn path for people who need this assistance and provide a great service, and their phone number is 131114. That's Lifeline. So it's just today acknowledging the contribution that Amanda Stapleton made to Casey, and may she rest in peace. Thank you. I now move to the confirmation of minutes of the council meeting held on the 14th of December 2021. Do I have a mover?
I'll move those, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman.
I'll second those.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 3, declaration of interests. I have considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020, and I have no declaration of interest to declare. Do my colleague administrators or any officers have any interest to declare?
I've considered my obligations, Chair, and I have nothing to declare.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar.
Chair, likewise, I have nothing to declare for this meeting.
Thanks, Mr. Boardman. I'll now move on to item 4, which is public question time. And I just wanted to start today. We've had a number of questions and many customers' requests related to the storms in October and the storms that occurred between October and December of last year. So in doing that, I just wanted to provide a general update for people on council's maintenance schedule, so people do understand what are the issues that we're facing. But also there are a number of residents who've raised questions this afternoon about specific locations. So if you are one of those residents watching this afternoon, I can advise you that a council officer will make contact with you as soon as possible and discuss the particular issues you have. But if there's a sense that you have that there's a safety issue related to a matter that you have previously raised, or the issue has changed in your local observation, please once again contact council through customer service. So with over 2,500 parks, reserves and roadsides across Casey, council uses 3 different contractors to maintain the majority of those open spaces. A smaller number of council facilities are serviced on different frequencies as well. Unfortunately, the contractor maintaining the local parks across Casey's central area, that's from Limbrook, Hampton Park, through Narre Warren and Cranbourne to Clyde North and Cranbourne East, has suffered ongoing staff shortages and long delays in the importation of equipment, particularly mowers, and that is related in part to COVID. Our priorities do remain in servicing the sites with the longest timeframes in between services and ensuring that there is a routine visit to those parks and reserves, and the maintenance schedule is also being adjusted so that the gap between mowing is reduced. So sites in the north of the municipality, the intention is they will be mowed every 3 weeks, and all parks in central Casey every 4 weeks. In addition to that, the storm cleanup has been challenging. It's not only been challenging for Casey, but it's been challenging for nearly every municipality that was affected by those storms, from Mornington Peninsula right through to Yarra Ranges and others. And whilst I appreciate that if you're somebody that has a concern about a particular area, we have had in excess of 5,200 customer requests for storm and tree-related assistance between October and December. That is an unprecedented increase. It's in excess of 50% of the volume of requests that Council received for the whole of the past financial year. So we still have a backlog of just over 900 jobs to work through. And with additional resources that Council is engaged, we're aiming to return to normal service levels by the end of this month. As I say, we're aiming to return to normal service levels by the end of the month. And whilst we continue to focus on the backlog, delays may be experienced in attending to the additional requests that have been received since late December with the additional storms that we've had. So it is a very challenging situation. I can assure the community that the officers are very aware of it. The director responsible for this area has updated the panel on a number of occasions, and we are very conscious of the issues that people have, particularly people's love for their local parks and areas that they frequent. So, as I say, if you believe you're in a situation where you originally reported and it's become more urgent because it's causing harm to people or damage to property, please make sure you let us know again. And if you do have a reference number that you were previously given, it will be helpful to the customer service team to provide that to them as well. You can either ring through or report an issue through our website. And can I say we are most appreciative of the patience of the community, and we do apologise for the delays that have occurred. We are working very hard to address these problems. So with respect to specific questions, there's a question from Mr. Shamal Sharma about school zone management. And Mr. Sharma's question is as follows. The traffic around Tully Allen Primary School in Cranbourne North during drop-off and pick-up is atrocious. Can the council consider developing a drop-off pick-up area in a nearby park or the sports reserve being constructed? The response that's been provided by the Manager of Safer Communities is that council is aware that short-term traffic congestion is typical around schools. For example, as is the case you've described, Mr. Sharma, at Tully Allen Primary School in Cranbourne North at student drop-off and pick-up zones, given the preference of drivers to park as close to the school as possible at start and finish times. Council has developed a Safe Around Schools program to work collaboratively with school communities with a key aim that is to try and address the traffic congestion, parking issues, unsafe driver behaviour and pedestrian risk at school times. Tully Allen Primary School was included in the 2021 program, and the school is very actively involved in promoting that road safety messaging around the school to parents and to children. And this includes monitoring the two existing drop-off and pick-up zones for the school on Burford Way and Wheelers Park Drive. In addition to those two existing drop-off and pick-up zones abutting the school community are encouraged to make greater use of active travel modes for their journey to and from school and to utilise nearby parks and reserves for car parking. And that really relies on parents taking up that offer as well and the school promoting those options to them. The sports reserve currently being constructed on the north side of the school is due for completion in the coming weeks, with the expectation that school traffic will be able to access the on-site car parks from the start of the second term of school this year. Council officers do frequently review traffic and parking conditions, particularly they will around this area subsequent to its opening, and note the need for any other changes. And in addition, Council's parking officers do frequently patrol and enforce parking restrictions, and they will have a renewed focus on Tully Allen in the coming weeks. So we thank you for that question, and also for those who've raised a number of questions around specific sites with respect to the management of grass and parks and reserves throughout the city. I now move on to officer reports, and our first report this afternoon is item 5.1, which is section 11A, instrument of authorisation under the Planning and Environment Act. Do I have a mover for the report?
Yes, I will move that report, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman, and a seconder.
Yes, I'll second that.
Thanks, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, very brief remarks. It is our first meeting of 2022, so belated Happy New Year to you, Mr. Belmar, council and everyone else, and Gong Xi Fa Sai for those who are celebrating the Year of the Tiger. But seeing as though it has been some time in between council meetings, we do get these reports quite frequently, and there has been some staff changes here at Casey, and we are obliged, of course, under section 147(4) of the Planning Environment Act to appoint Class A officers listed in the attachment, and Class B officers also listed in the attachment for the purposes of adhering to the regulations made under that Act, and also under section 313 of the Local Government Act to instigate proceedings for offences against those acts and regulations in this instrument. So this is a hygiene and administrative resolution to ensure that we are empowering and delegating council officers appropriately to ensure that they meet the obligations under the various statutes and also the expectations of their communities. And it is appropriate with those comments, Chair, to again acknowledge all employees in this area for the workload, the processing times, their efficiency in a very high growth area, and thank them for their professionalism and diligence in the circumstances. And with that, I'm very pleased to move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar, anything to add?
And Chair, in seconding this, I acknowledge the work of the officers that have been working to ensure that we're always up to date and decisions are being made in accordance with delegations. And I have nothing more to add to this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.2 is land acquisition 1325 Bellato Road, Cranbourne East. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I'll move that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar, and a seconder.
I will second the recommendation as put, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. And Mr. Belmar, I invite you to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Chair. This is with some respects, a procedural motion, but an important motion because of the legislative requirements with council being an acquirer of land. I will note reading this report that it's intended to acquire a parcel of land which is required for the construction and widening, in fact, of Bellato Road in the vicinity of Cranbourne East and Casey Fields in that precinct structure plan. I considered the material. I note that it contains valuation information and also a plan showing where it is intended to acquire the land. I've considered that material, and I'm of the view that it's appropriate to pass this motion. And I want to thank the officers who've worked on this and to ensure that at all times land is being acquired at the appropriate time, not too early and not late, to ensure that roads are being built as required by our growing community. And with those short comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman, would you like to speak to the motion?
Very briefly, Chair, I acknowledge Belmar's comments and equally have reviewed the recommendations and documents, particularly the valuation and the process that council officers have undertaken with meeting the expectations of the Cranbourne East and Casey Fields South residential precinct structure plans. And I'm satisfied that the process is appropriate in the circumstances and endorse the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Did I see your hand, Mr. Belmar? Thank you. Thank you. Carried. Item 5.3, land acquisition 10 Gwen Road, Cranbourne West. Do I have a move for the recommendation?
I will move that recommendation as put, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I second that.
Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chair. As we have just dealt with a matter of property acquisition in Cranbourne East, we move to Cranbourne West, and a matter that concerns the precinct structure plan in that part of the municipality. Specifically, it's the widening construction of local industrial roads, which will service as vital transport access to the industrial business park area, which is located immediately south of Thompson's Road. We know as a council there is a significant amount of development in that area. It is having an impact upon certainly traffic in Thompson's Road, which is a matter that is very much under further consideration within the organisation itself, and certainly under further consideration outside of this organisation with both the state and the Commonwealth Government. But importantly, to ensure that we can create ongoing appropriate levels of accessibility into the industrial park immediately south of Thompson's Road. This piece of land at 10 Gwyn Road, Cranbourne West, will be acquired. It is a relatively small parcel of land as dictated on the plan of subdivision in the public available attachments. An independent valuation has been obtained which meets the market expectations, and as a consequence of the process again that is appropriate in the circumstances and meets the requirements under the Cranbourne West PSP, I am pleased to move the recommendation as put and to authorise the CEO to act on the council's behalf with this matter, and to acknowledge that this is as I said, a vital part of further ease of transport flow in a growing part of the municipality, but one which hopefully in the future we'll be able to make some further announcements in due course. So with that, those comments, Chair, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. And Mr. Belmar, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. Just echoing the comments of Mr. Boardman, I've considered the material. I note that it includes a valuation report, and I note that the intention of the acquisition is the continuing improvement of the road network, and in this particular case, importantly, in land that is used for industrial purposes. I am satisfied with the material that all the appropriate work has been done to ensure compliance with our legislative requirements, and I am happy to second the motion and thank the officers that have worked on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4 is our final report this afternoon, and that's Casey Growth Areas payments from reserves February 2022. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I've moved this recommendation.
Thanks, Mr. Belmar. And a seconder?
Yes, I will second the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. And Mr. Belmar, please speak to the motion.
Thank you, Chair. Now, this motion is again a motion that's related to council expenditure, but from a different source this time, and this is to authorise payments from a contribution plan and public open space contribution reserves. In particular, the motion will achieve two goals. One is that it authorises our CEO to enter into an intersection works agreement in relation to works at Cameron Street and Elmsley Drive, Cranbourne East, and secondly, that the CEO or the delegate make payments from reserves that are held in accordance with the Planning and Environment Act. I've considered the material, the confidential material that is attached to each of these motions, and I note that in relation to the first part of the recommendation, that it's appropriate that work be done with respect to the intersection. Again, it's part of the continuing development of our road network and ensuring that roads and the road network is up to date with the continuing development of Casey. Secondly, with respect to claims and for payment against contribution reserves, again, that is work that is done by our planners over many years to ensure that reserves are held so that at the time that work has been done and developers make claims, that the funds are able to be paid in ensuring that the work has been completed. And again, there is attached to our confidential attachment a list of items over which the claims apply, and I am satisfied that it's appropriate that our CEO proceed to acknowledge those claims and make the necessary payments as they are required. I want to thank the officers that have worked on this, and I want to acknowledge the careful planning that is undertaken over many years to ensure that the funds are available when they are required, and the careful management of council to ensure that we're always able to meet these payments when required. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman.
I'll echo everything Mr. Belmar has said and go on to acknowledge those in the City Planning Infrastructure Division and also in our finance team for the detailed information and the consideration and the preparation they go through to provide us with extensive updates, briefings and progress reports on this matter. It is not something that is self-administered when we take in consideration the significant sums which are held in the CP reserve and the POS contribution reserves. And it is something that I think all of us acknowledge that allows us with much more confidence to make appropriate decisions in this regard, such as this recommendation, knowing that the phasing, the management and the collection and general administration of those funds is meeting all of our expectations and all of our statutory compliance requirements. So I do acknowledge what Mr. Belmar said, and I support the recommendation as put and subsequently authorise the CEO to make the payments in accordance with the report as stipulated.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That concludes officer reports for this afternoon. Now move on to consideration of reports of committees, and I note the record of discussion as listed in the agenda papers. The report that's tabled is the Audit and Risk Committee meeting of the 1st of February, and the minutes of that are attached. And as Mr. Boardman is our representative on that committee, was there anything particular that you wanted to highlight, Mr. Boardman, or are you happy just to make the report?
I'll acknowledge the minutes as put, but if I can inform the panel and the audience that there is a elevated direction from the committee to look at Casey's digital information security architecture, or not as what's colloquially known as cybersecurity, by way of incorporating that into forward internal audit plans by conducting cybersecurity maturity assessments in addition to other assessments within the organisation, ensure there's correlations of appropriate standards, policies, protocols that are meeting our technical expectations, but also most importantly providing security and confidence of the public that public information and sensitive information are being managed, stored, accounted and protected accordingly. I have had the privilege since to meet with the IT team who are charged with this particular part of Council's business, and following that meeting, I'm pleased to report to the panel I have full confidence in the direction that Casey's taken. In fact, I'll go as far as saying that Casey's security architecture and its attention to its security posture is in excess of other comparable size organisations. There is acknowledgement of further standards, policy, process and response and resilience aspects in this regard. But it is one part, as I said, from the ARC's perspective, that we are taking a heightened view, not only because it is the right thing and there are statutory expectations within our obligations, but it is such an important matter from public confidence that we want to ensure that we do everything we possibly can to prevent any information being compromised or any of our security architecture being compromised either. But as I say that, Chair and Mr. Belmar, I am confident that the team is well and truly on the right track. The organisation as a whole is developing a security culture with various training desktops and other behavioural activities, and I'll be pleased at future council meetings to report back with status reports accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. And I think we have the chair of our audit committee, Mr. Nguyen, coming to the next council meeting in March to report as well. So thank you for that update. That's most helpful, and it is a very important role that the Audit Committee plays, and I think we're in good hands with your representation and Mr. Nguyen's hearing, so thank you for that contribution. We also are noting the record of discussion of the council briefings, so we simply note those. Now move to item 7, which is petitions, and there are 2 matters in the petitions. The first is a matter with respect to a gum tree in Boree Court in Berwick. And whilst technically it's not in the correct form of the petition, we will acknowledge it in this section, because I think it's fair to say that those residents that signed that document do believe that it was a petition. So there's a recommendation there that council table the petition, and I'll leave that to Mr. Boardman or Mr. Belmar to move. And we don't have it on the screen as yet, Ms. Estrada. So,
whilst that's being done, Chair, can I confirm that I'll be speaking?
Yes, okay. Well, perhaps Mr. Belmar, I can invite you to speak and just read the recommendation with respect to this item of the gum tree in Boree Court, Berwick.
Yes, thank you. I'll just confirm for the meeting and for the residents that I have viewed the petition. I understand that it relates to a tree that presents a danger, and the recommendation that I'm moving is as follows. 1, that council table the petition regarding the safety concerns of a tree located adjacent to 18B Boree Court, Berwick. Number 2, that council officers investigate the street trees in Boree Court, Berwick and undertake remedial action as required. 3, that council officers advise the head petitioner the result of council's investigation and any action planned. And that's the recommendation. And having read the petition, it's dated in late January. It's appropriate that that work occur, as certainly the residents of Boree Court are concerned, and the recommendation I'm moving takes into account the concern and also requires that staff report back to the head petitioner or inform the head petitioner as to their investigations.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman, are you going to second that petition?
I'll second the recommendation as put.
The recommendation, sorry, I beg your pardon.
The recommendation is put by Mr. Belmar.
Thank you. I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? Carried. And we have a petition with respect to community care accommodation at Bamboo Court, Doveton. And there is also a recommendation there. So whoever is proposing to move this, I would also ask you read the recommendation. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Chair, I will move the recommendation associated with petition 2.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. If you would read that recommendation, and we'll seek a seconder.
Certainly, the recommendation relates to petition 2 with 10 signatures regarding the community care accommodation. I should say the proposed community care accommodation at Bamboo Court in Doveton. The recommendation that I will move in my name will be that council acknowledge the petition received via the head petitioner in opposing to planning application PA 21-0799 for a community care accommodation at 14 Bamboo Court in Doveton, and 2, that the petition be referred to council officers for consideration assessing planning application PA 21-0799 for a community care accommodation at 14 Bamboo Court, Doveton. Before I seek a seconder, through you, Chair, for my recommendation, I'm happy to make some comments in relation to the petition and my rationale for moving the recommendation.
I'll just see if there's a seconder first and then invite you to speak. Mr. Belmar?
Yes, I second the recommendation.
Go ahead with your comments, Mr. Boardman.
Thank you, Chair. We, as I stated, we acknowledge that a petition has been received against the planning application that I won't repeat the reference number, it is in the recommendation, but it is for the community care accommodation facility, which involves 3 dwellings at 14 Bamboo Court, Doveton. I did say that the petition had 10 signatures. There's actually 33 signatures in the petition, so I do apologise for that slight error. And the basis of the objection stated that, and I'll quote, that our objection is against the development on the grounds that Bamboo Court is a quiet residential court location housing families and elderly pensioners who have been leading a quiet lifestyle, which will be compromised. This project has been proposed without any consultation with the residents of this area in Doveton. Therefore, the following petition is hereby request the council disapprove the development proposal. Whilst we acknowledge the petition, I do also acknowledge that the planning application will provide accommodation, or is proposed to provide accommodation for people with disabilities through the attached residences. The registered supported independent living providers who will be assigning carers to the site through the proposal will be attending the site in rostered shifts, so they'll be providing ongoing caregiving services to the tenants in each of the residents. The carers themselves, as stipulated in the proposal, will not reside on site, and the supports provided to future residents will be forward funded by the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. That is the proposal, and we do acknowledge the objection from the 33 petitioners. I do need to stress, Chair, that no decision has been made by Council on this planning application at this stage. The planning application is currently on public exhibition, and we do thank the petitioners for expressing their view as a consequence of that public exhibition and consultation phase. All submissions and objections to the planning application, including this petition, will be considered thoroughly in the making of the decision regarding the planning application. Council officers, through their statutory obligations, will assess the application against all of the provisions of the KC planning scheme, and parties will be notified of the decision, including the petitioners, when such a decision is made. And any party who feels that the decision is unjust or contrary to aspects within the KC's planning scheme do, of course, have revision rights to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. So that is an important part of the process. So with that background, I do again thank the petitioners for expressing their view, but do stress that this is an ongoing matter, and we have confidence that the council officers will apply due process and an appropriate consideration of all of the matters raised in this application, and will make a decision in due course.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you for that summary overview, Mr. Boardman. That concludes the petitions for this afternoon. We now move on to item 8, urgent business. So there is none to consider, but there are items to consider in closed council. And before I close the meeting, I'll just make reference to those 2 closed items for consideration. The first is a matter that council will consider under section 3A, which of the Local Government Act 2020, which is a reference to council business information being information that will prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released, and also a reference to section 3G, which is private commercial information. The second item is being considered in confidential under section 3H of the Local Government Act 2020, and that's confidential meeting information. So that leaves me to go to item 11, which is to close the meeting, to say thank you to those who have attended the meeting, who've raised questions, lodged petitions, and taken interest in the business of council this afternoon. And good afternoon to everybody. Thank you.